All right, it's Wednesday morning. It's January 20th. It's the morning of the inauguration. Guess what we're doing? I have to preach a sermon this week about the story of Jesus borrowing the boat, Simon's fishing boat. So I thought, hey, we're in Minnesota in January. I'm going to find me a fisherman and borrow his fish house. So this is John Peterson. Everybody say hi, John. Hey, John, let me ask you a question. Let's just pretend for a second, okay? Let's pretend that you've been out here in your fishing house all night long and you haven't caught a single thing, and you're done, you're tired, and then I come up to you as your pastor and I say, hey, John, I really want you to go back in there and drop your line again. What are you gonna think? What are you gonna say?
I'd say you have no idea what you're talking about. You came from Las Vegas and really just don't know anything about ice fishing. I'd say forget it. I've been here all night. There's nothing biting.
Yeah, but I'm your pastor. Can you just do it? Just humor a guy just for a second. Would you go do it?
Yeah, yep. You know what? I'll do it. I'll go ahead. I'll throw my lines down a little bit. Yeah.
Excellent. And so let's pretend that you go do that, right?
Okay.
And yeah, no, I'm just telling you that we're just pretending, okay? Because I actually can't make anything happen. But let's just pretend like you went in there, and all of a sudden the fish, they just start jumping out of the hole, and they're filling up your tent so much that it's gonna burst. Like in that moment, if that really happened, would your ideas about me change at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you did something miraculous that I hadn't been able to do all night, and it's been frustrating. I'd take you with me every time I went fishing.
That's right. I'd be your lucky fisherman.
Yeah.
So excellent. So thanks for humoring me, John. That's exactly what happened in our story today. So let's dive into the text and see what's going on. So thanks a lot, John.
You bet. Happy fishing.
Well, this winter, our worship series is called Meeting Jesus. This week's lesson in Luke chapter 5, verses 1 through 11, as I was reading it, it really raised two questions for me. First, where do we meet Jesus? Now, last week, Pastor Megan taught us a story about when Jesus was teaching in a synagogue. Now, that makes sense, right? I mean, rabbis and religious leaders, they usually show up in religious buildings. But this week, Jesus is showing up in a fishing boat. Now, the fishing boat, it was Simon's place of work. It wasn't a church or a synagogue or a holy place. It was just the same beach that Simon, James, and John have been working every day for years. And we'll see throughout this series that Jesus is more often out in the fields, in a house, on a mountain, and walking along the road. He's more often in those places than he is in a place of religious ceremony. See, here's the thing. Jesus shows up where we are. Now, we've just come through a week where our attention has been focused on national politics. In all transparency, I'm recording this sermon on the morning of the inauguration, Wednesday the 20th, and I don't know what is going to happen today, so I can't comment on it. But the only point I want to make about it is this. My hunch is that if Jesus were here in the flesh today, he wouldn't show up in places of power. He was born in a stable to poor parents. He grew up in an obscure town, and he made his friends with fishermen, with tax collectors, prostitutes, and common folk. Jesus was a Jewish prophet, and he spoke truth to power, and he called national leaders to seek justice for the poor, the oppressed, and the outcast. And they killed him for it. So, I chose to preach from this fish house today. Not in the pulpit at church, not all dressed up, but just like a fisherman, because I think that more accurately represents where Jesus is and where we can encounter God. So I invite you right now to imagine yourself in your place of work or in a place where you spend most of your time. Now imagine Jesus there in the flesh, just like he showed up in Simon's boat, maybe inside of this fish house. I wondered, do you ever encounter God at work? Because that's probably where Jesus shows up. Well, the second question I have is, what happens when we meet Jesus? I mean, look at what Jesus does. He challenges Simon. Hey, Simon, I want you to go back out there and fish some more. Put your nets in the water and see what happens. Now, you have to understand a couple of things about the way they fished back then. They had large nets that they would span between two boats, and they drag the nets along in the water. And they fished at night so that the fish wouldn't see the nets coming. So Simon tells Jesus that they've been fishing all night and they haven't caught anything. So why does Simon do what Jesus asks? I mean, he's not a fisherman. Well, according to Luke's version of the story, Simon has known Jesus for a while. We saw that Jesus healed his mother-in-law in the last chapter. So Simon respects Jesus enough to humor him. So they take the boats out in daylight when they know the fish aren't there. And something amazing happens. There are so many fish that Simon has to call in reinforcements. There are so many fish that the boats are going to sink if they don't get to shore on time. Now, the first thing that happens when we see Jesus is that Jesus turns the ordinary into something extraordinary. Now, notice what happens next. This is not just a fish story that Luke included because it's interesting. This is a very significant call story that echoes many other stories like it in the Hebrew Scriptures. Simon has just encountered something truly extraordinary. Notice how Simon responds. He realizes that Jesus isn't just an interesting teacher. He realizes that Jesus isn't just a healer. Jesus has power over nature itself. Simon is standing in the presence of God, and he is undone. He is overwhelmed by his own sinfulness and shame in the presence of the truly holy. See, that's the second thing that happens when we truly meet Jesus. We are undone by our unholiness. Now, Luke tells this story to purposefully reflect the call stories of the Hebrew Scripture. You remember back in Exodus when Moses sees the burning bush? God turns an ordinary bush extraordinary by making it burn but not be consumed. And Moses is undone. I mean, he tells God all the reasons that he is not worthy to be God's mouthpiece in Egypt. But God promises to be with the weak Moses. Moses asks God, "What is your name?" And God responds, "Yahweh, I am what I am." When Simon responds to Jesus, he calls him Lord. This is the Greek version of Yahweh. And remember when we read about Isaiah back in the fall? Isaiah is standing in front of the ordinary temple when suddenly it is transformed into the extraordinary footstool of God's universal throne. And Isaiah says, "I am undone. I am a man of unclean lips, and we are a people of unclean lips." What happens when we meet Jesus and recognize him for who he is? God made flesh. If we let it, we are undone. And then Jesus shines the light of truth into our life and exposes all the things that drag us down. Simon is undone by the holiness of God. But then something else happens, something beautiful. Jesus tells Simon that from now on, you will catch people. It's like Jesus is saying, Simon, I know you aren't perfect, and you know you're not perfect. And that's what makes you perfect for the job. I want to take your natural ability to catch fish and transform it into something that you can use for God's kingdom. See, that's the third thing that happens when we truly meet Jesus. Like Simon, who is undone by God's holiness, we are transformed by the mission of God. It's so easy for us to be caught in the doldrums of this life, especially during this pandemic, when many of us have been trapped in our homes, sitting at the same computer screen for 10 months, wondering when life will start to happen again, and we're overwhelmed by the unrest swirling around us in our nation. Yet even now, in the midst of all of these circumstances, life can be transformed when we remember something very important. You are on a mission. Every one of us has been called by God to carry on the work of Jesus Christ, right here in our ordinary places of work. When you wake up in the morning, do you think, oh, great, another day to do the same routine? Or do you think, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do for your kingdom today? Now, notice how the story ends. Luke tells us that Simon, James, and John, they dropped their nets. They left everything and followed Jesus. There's two key things here. One, they learned to trust that God will provide. Their provision was not based on their ability to fish, but comes from the one who provides fish. And two, they came together. Simon, James, and John. The mission of God is a team sport. Jesus didn't do it on his own. He called disciples and trained them. And then we'll see later that he never sent them out all alone. So, in the light of this story, here's three things that I want you to ponder this week. One, can you meet Jesus in your daily life? God is the giver and sustainer of life. Your life, your job, your family, everything is a gift from God. You can meet Jesus right there if you have eyes to see. Two, are you ready to let go of the nets and trust? Everything you have is a gift from God. In our society, it's so easy to believe that we are in control of everything and it is up to us to make things happen. So we cling tightly to what we have. We cling so tightly that we can cut off all the circulation and we can slowly die. Open up your hands. Drop the nets. Everything is a gift from God. Hold it loosely and let's learn to breathe in God's grace. And third, who are your mission partners? Easter Lutheran Church, we are in this together. If you have a spouse, a family, or a trusted friend, a life group, a service team, these are your people. Lean on them because you are not alone. This week, my prayer is that you will meet Jesus in a new way and that your ordinary places will become extraordinary. Amen.